You've got a great idea for a small business, but you just can't get it off the ground. You want to be your own boss, set your own hours. Well, new year means new opportunities, and Shopify's got you covered to help get your venture off the ground. Shopify makes it easy to manage your growing business. You can get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates. And they help with the details like shipping, taxes, and payments from one single dashboard. Don't kick yourself next holiday season when your 2025 resolution list looks the same as it does today. Make it happen with Shopify. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/income.
She stole $6 million.
From the award-winning podcast,
I'm Lacey Mosley.
a new true crime series.
They call me Scam Goddess. I'm going on a journey across America to dive into small-town swindles
How can you not trust this local farm girl?
and big city cons.
He was pimping the congregation.
People say that would never happen to me. Never say never.
Scam Goddess. Series premiere January 15th on Freeform and stream on Hulu.
Hello, everybody. It is the Somewhere on Earth podcast for Tuesday, the 14th of January, 2025. Thank you, Neil Carmichael, by the way, who sent us a Happy New Year message over the break. And it was an especially nice message. So, hello, Neil. Thanks for the message and Happy New Year back. Right. So, we are, well, kind of partly in London, but not really. Anya's in London. I'm somewhere outside London. Angelica, who we'll hear from in a moment, is still in Sao Paulo state. And I'm busy breaking my New Year's resolution to do more things in person because this is completely online. But then, heaven help me. All right, so I mentioned that we have Angelica Mari, who's frowning at me for already breaking a New Year's resolution. But how are you nonetheless, Angelica?
I'm good. Happy to be back with you again.
Nice.
And sad I can't be joining you for a pint in person
I
at a
know.
pub, helping you with your New Year's resolution.
It would be so much nicer. But so it goes when there's a rather big puddle called the Atlantic separating us. But I can begin proceedings just by giving a little kind of tech kind of anecdote, if we're into that, just briefly.
Yes, indulge me.
For various reasons, I was in Glasgow quite recently, and I was looking for something to do at the end of a Sunday afternoon. I thought, I know, I'll go to the Glasgow Museum of Modern Art. And I'm glad I did, because upstairs on the top floor, Gallery 3, they had a piece called Head in a Bell by an artist and musician called Scott Miles. And I think you're quite like this, Angelica, because you're into your music and your sort of technology and keyboards and synthesizers. But the whole idea was to kind of create a synthesized piece of music, sound, call it what you will, based on the workings, the inner workings of the museum building itself. And so what Scott Miles has done is he's set all these microphones up in different parts of the museum, these hidden away parts like the plant machinery, the air conditioning plant and stuff like that. And then they're all running through these very luridly, brilliantly coloured yellow microphone leads into the central part of Gallery 3. And they're all plugged into this amazing looking modular synthesizer, and some equally amazing sounds are coming out. And I'm quite geeky about this kind of thing, and I loved it. So I just thought
This is so cool. This is so cool. Now, can you perhaps do an analogy of what it sounded like? Was it more like a kind of synth sound, more like Erasure, or it was more like Carl Cox or Bonobo or that kind of thing?
I wouldn't even say it was anywhere near those. I mean, Throbbing Gristle, maybe, just about. It was low, deep rumbles punctuated by slightly metallic sounds. You know, it was like that.
It was like industrial kind of sound.
Yeah, like post-industrial, like, you know, something like that. But anyway, it was all very.
Did you
very
do a bit
clever.
of dancing?
Yeah, I don't think you dance to it really, to be honest. I'm not selling it very well, am I? But I love the concept. But I wouldn't want to listen to 8 hours of it. But I was happy to gaze at the modular synth, and it was brilliant. There we are. Right, that's our arts section done at the beginning. The value we deliver on this podcast, but now let's do some other stuff. Here we go. And coming up today, we're spotting fireballs in this edition. Could anything be cooler than that? Now, this is where something or some things streak across the night sky, and then a whole army of amateurs, astronomers, mathematicians, a whole lot of them, they can log and locate these fireballs as they streak across the sky. And that means science can happen. They can do some analysis on these things. Yes, I'm talking about this thing called the UK Fireball Alliance. All very educational, which is more than can be said for certain apps that call themselves educational, but really they just aren't. One researcher has had enough and is calling for change, and she is on this very podcast, all right here on Somewhere on Earth. So then, congratulations if you've been able to spot the first meteor shower of 2025. The Quadrantid shower has been wowing amateur and professional astronomers alike. Now, despite my best efforts, I must admit I still haven't caught it. Too much cloud, I'm afraid, but I do remain hopeful. Now, these particular space rocks, by the way, they are on a celestial flyby, but sometimes such objects do fall down here to Earth. And when they do, there's a good chance that the excellently named UK Fireball Alliance is going to identify them. The Alliance brings together images and video from cameras all over the place, whether they're doorbell or dash cams, security cameras, or professionals with actual telescopes. The whole idea is to pull all this data together so that you can end up with a great big "here it is" message that tells scientists where to go and retrieve the fallen meteors. Now, I've been hearing more about all this from Luke Daly, lecturer in planetary geoscience at the University of Glasgow. And the Glasgow again, we're talking about Glasgow a lot this week. Now, Luke is the UK Fireball Alliance treasurer, and he's been telling me how the outfit got started.
It rose out of the fact that we had all these networks of cameras all acting independently in the UK, imaging the night sky for varieties of reasons, to look for like aurora, lightning, but also for meteors and fireballs. And we kind of realized, why don't we all just like work together to try and find the first meteorite to fall in the UK for the last kind of 30 years. And so it brings together amateur astronomers, CCTV cameras, Raspberry Pi cameras, academic-led camera networks, curation facilities that want to look after any space rocks we find, and also all the institutions that want to study any rocks we find. And so it's really kind of bringing this cross-section of the country who are all interested in what's going on in our atmosphere and meteorites and fireballs and stuff, and bringing them all together under one roof to try and find meteorites in the UK, which is an incredibly hard thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. Because these things are rare, they're fleeting, they're difficult to observe for all kinds of pretty obvious reasons. But there are just so many different cameras out there and camera networks, doorbell cams, I suppose. And this is all data, that is stuff that you can bring together and help look out for these rare phenomena.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of been amazing to see kind of the technology change. Like, I remember when I was first starting my PhD, we were just kind of moving into the digital age, and the original cameras that we had, or people had in like the outback of Australia, were these big like metric ton things, that all these moving parts that were really kind of expensive and challenging to build. And now, like, we transitioned to off-the-shelf digital cameras were good enough to image a fireball, and now even the camera on your doorbell is good enough to not only tell if there's an intruder or a dog that you don't want coming into your property, but also imaging a fireball careening past your house in the background. And so it's amazing we have this kind of rich data set of different types of imaging, different types of videography, so we can basically see these fireballs as they come through from multiple different angles. So it's great to combine them all together. So if my camera network that I'm running, called the UK Fireball Network, only sees it on one camera, but there are 10 other cameras from any of the other networks all around it, we can still piece together where that fireball went, if any rocks landed on the ground, and also where it came from in space.
Because you know where the cameras are, I suppose, and all the images, because they're internet-enabled cameras generally, they're time-stamped, aren't they? So you have the time, you have the geofix, and there are lots of these different points of observation, so you can pull together a whole trajectory of what you're seeing in the sky. Does it work like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to completely trivialize the maths. It's incredibly complicated, hypervelocity materials passing through an atmosphere. But it's essentially glorified spherical trigonometry, where you've got multiple vantage points seeing the same thing. You put all those planes into the air and they eventually intersect at the same line, and you can transect that down. Where it gets a bit more interesting, though, is when the light goes out, and then the maths gets really complicated, because when you're seeing it come through the atmosphere in the bright fireball, you can see it and track it and figure out where it is, and you know how high it was, how fast it's going. You've got all that time-stamped information. It's really lovely. As soon as the light goes out, it's just a rock in free fall, and so you kind of don't know where it goes from about 11 kilometers up to the ground. And again, fortunately in the UK, we're really passionate about our weather and what our weather's doing. So we've got really good wind models and know where the wind's blowing at different levels in the atmosphere and the troposphere. So we can then model where that poor little rock is going to spiral its way down, be blown in different directions, and then predict where it's going to land. The people that do this do kind of all sorts of mathematical wizardry, and it's incredibly precise. I'm always gobsmacked every time we kind of go out to look for meteorites, and when we find them, they've been about 200 meters from where they were predicted to fall, which is ridiculous, tracking a fist-sized rock from 11 kilometers up to the ground.
Insane. What about the other way around, though? Can you then triangulate upwards and get a sense of not just where the rock ended up when it landed on the face of the planet, but where it came from in space, roughly?
And yes,
or precisely even.
Absolutely, and that's kind of the main motivation for this. So meteorites are beautiful rocks. They tell us amazing things about how our solar system formed, but most of them are just fortuitous finds. We found them on the ground. They might have been there for 1,000 years or 10 years. We don't know. And we don't know where in our solar system they came from. Whereas when we see the fireball, we can track it through the atmosphere and track it to the ground and get a beautiful, fresh, pristine meteorite like Winchcombe, where it had no terrestrial contamination and everything formed in space. But we can also track it back and figure out its orbit, and then through quite complicated models figure out what asteroid or asteroid families these meteorites are originating from. So we can start building up a geological map of our solar system of where extraterrestrial materials are coming from that are hitting the Earth right now, and hopefully build up that kind of geological context that we're sorely missing from the meteorite record.
That's Luke Daly, super enthusiastic there, and I don't blame him. And I mean, anybody's going to be enthusiastic if you're involved with the UK Fireball Alliance. I must admit, Angelica, just the name of the alliance just made me want to find out more about it. And then, the tech behind it is fabulous.
And the short name is UK Fall.
Yeah. That's yeah, it is. That's quite a lot to unpack here, isn't there? About like what might be in it for the everyday person who might want to join the UK Fireball Alliance. Like, Angelica, if you were to donate your doorbell cam footage, for instance, to this, I mean, why would you do that, I suppose?
Oh, first of all, I love the community aspect of this project. It's just so cool. They're like a group of astronomical detectives that could space the next piece of space history landing on our backyard. So I think the real magic here isn't just the falling space rocks, is how communities are coming together to track them. But back to your question of what's in it for the everyday person. But just imagine being part of a team that finds the next piece of Mars, for example, that is landed on someone's garden, or even discovering a meteorite that has molecules that could give us some insight about the origins of life. I don't know. Every camera is like a sort of a window to catch these rare moments where pieces of space history literally fall to Earth.
I think so, and like beyond helping the scientists, because I know what you mean about this magic of looking at things falling to Earth. And I should say, actually, one of Luke's colleagues, when I saw Luke, was showing me a collection of her own meteorites, and to hold some of this stuff in your hand and to think this is from the early solar system, this is actually older than the Earth even, or at least this kind of formed around the same time that the Earth was still some big molten hulk of rock. I mean, that is phenomenal. So you can really get the science aspect of it. But I mean, do you think even beyond the science there are special aspects to being part of all this?
Yeah, I've seen people making cufflinks out of meteorite material. I think the Winchcombe one. It was really, really cool. I think if you're part of this network and you've captured something interesting on camera, your camera, there could be something really interesting sitting on your footage. And perhaps that footage could even hold the key to a massive discovery. So you're part of something much bigger, than just sort of allowing your camera footage to feed something like a big pool of data, random data.
And when you're having discussions like this, I'm sure AI and machine learning, that's never far away, is it? Given that all this data now that is presenting itself, there must be some real opportunities from machine learning.
Yeah. Artificial intelligence really does seem to be very promising because helps researchers to scan through what can be thousands of camera feeds. A couple of years ago, researchers at Curtin University recovered a meteorite from the outback of Western Australia using drones and AI, and that was a world first. So that seems to be a relatively recent kind of use. But one question is, could this technology spot things that human observers might miss? I think we're only just scratching the surface of what's possible of this intersection of citizen science and artificial intelligence. But as the tech evolves, we might possibly see some more breakthroughs soon.
Yeah, I'm sure so. Well, Angelica, thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/SBO. Terms and conditions apply.
Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Hey Atlanta, Apple is open for small business. That's right. We're here to make starting and running your business simpler. With privacy and security built in on all devices, it's easy for you to protect your customers' data. And if you need hardware or software support, you'll get advice from business experts at no cost whatsoever. So you can focus more on the soup du jour and less on, the other stuff. At Apple, we're open for your small business. Go to apple.com/small business or visit an Apple store to learn more.
We're going to talk about educational apps now, and really this worry that so-called educational apps are anything but, and they might be doing more harm than good. Now, this is the worry from one educational technology researcher, and she's just been writing about her concerns in the journal Nature. Natalia Kurchakova is director of the International Centre for EdTech Impact and professor at the University of Stavanger in Norway. And she worries that educational authorities and schools and families, they're basically wasting a whole load of money on ineffective apps. Better regulation is needed, and well, that's what she says, and I caught up with Natalia earlier.
Well, I've been researching children's use of technology for the past 10-15 years, and as we've been looking at various tools that are out there, we have seen that over time the quality hasn't really improved. So the piece that I wrote for Nature is like a summary piece of the issues we've been noticing as researchers for the past, as I say, 15 years in terms of very low quality of children's educational technology on the market.
And there are some striking statistics in your piece, including like how many countries have banned smartphones in schools.
That is a statistic coming from UNESCO and a global monitoring report. They have been as you may have seen, not advocating directly for mobile phone bans, but they have certainly been saying that governments should consider very carefully whether they allow children the use of mobile phones in schools. And the GEM report that was published in 2023 made it very clear that the added value of technology is not there when we look at the data across different studies being done. So their argument has been to either very strongly limit or ban smartphones from schools. And according to their campaigns at UNESCO, many countries have followed the recommendation, and I believe the latest number is 60 countries that have formally banned smartphones.
As for the edtech industry itself, how big is it then?
It's a multi-million billion industry, depends on, what you include under the umbrella of edtech. But if we think about the thousands of educational apps out there in the App Store, plus learning platforms, e-books, digital books, it is a massive industry that is producing new products every day. And we as researchers are trying to keep pace, but we know still very little in terms of what is out there and what works.
And your point in your article is about how bad many of these apps are, and maybe even positively harmful in some case. Before we get to that, though, let's just do the positives first, then, because in an ideal world, how can educational technology help in education?
There are many positives too, and we do have studies that show when these technologies are designed well, then they can positively support learning. And those kinds of studies have been looking at technologies that have been designed with the science of learning principles in mind, that have been designed in collaboration with researchers. Those kinds of studies can show that the use of ebooks, for example, positively impacts children's learning, literacy scores. Especially for children from disadvantaged backgrounds, we see that there is an added value of these technologies. But the design is a crucial question, because if you have apps that are distracting and have many bells and whistles, you see the opposite effect. Instead of supporting literacy, it is either no effect or negative effect on children. So it's extremely important to talk about design, to be able to say what is quality and what is not, so that we can see the benefits that we could be seeing in terms of the potential that EdTech has.
Yeah, so any developer can come up with an app and they can brand it as being educational without any limitation to that claim. So to me, this sounds like a regulatory issue, or more to the point, a lack of regulation in this space.
Yes, you could say that. I mean, in many respects, the focus of regulation has been on the use of data with young children, right? Making sure that these technologies comply with GDPR and other data privacy regulations, and rightly so. It's very important that the data that is being managed and collected by these tools is being monitored and carefully considered. But it did mean that the quality question has somehow been less considered by policymakers. And arguably, if we have tools that are of no use or of very little learning value, then what is the point, even if they are, properly collecting data? So it has been an ongoing issue from the researcher side in terms of pushing for this quality question to be on the policymakers' radar. And I think last year we have seen some signals in terms of policymakers really listening in terms of saying what the COVID-19 and other experiences have brought to schools, in terms of the huge amount of junk apps that are just not useful.
Do you have any examples specifically of like a junk app, as you put it, but just examples of apps that really do get this wrong?
There is a good sort of depository of apps that have been verified by researchers is on eduevidence.org. So those would be perhaps the examples of apps that have been working on demonstrating their learning benefits, and there is some evidence that it works. So perhaps those will be the good examples. In terms of the bad examples, it's hard for any researcher to be sort of naming and blacklisting specific tools. But I would say that there are some general features that we see across apps that are not effective, and they include stuff like distracting images, distracting text and sounds that just happen on the screen, pop-up messages and hotspots, a lot of moving images on the screen. Those are the things that we know from research are not conducive to learning, and as I say, might not only have no effect but have a negative effect. So it's essentially wasting the child's time.
And indeed wasting money, schools' money, educators, families, parents' money, whoever's paying for these things. So what about solutions to all this then? In your article, you're asking really for more collaboration. That's what you're calling for, isn't it? Between governments and, providers in this space.
And researchers. I think, as researchers, we cannot just expect by sitting in the ivory tower that somehow the commercial market will rectify itself. We as researchers need to collaborate with these commercial producers to help them see what are the design changes that could be made so that we can see higher learning outcomes. Because there have been a lot of studies showing the positive effects of EdTech, but the studies have been done with tools developed by researchers that have never been commercialized. So we too, as researchers, need to learn how to create tools that are engaging and that, get the big sales out there. So it's about making sure that what is out there, what children already use and are familiar with, that we improve it, that we make sure that it does integrate what we know about how the brain works and how learning works. And through partnerships between designers and researchers, we can hopefully also design new and better tools.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, because I do a bit of teaching myself at university level, we have to define, and school teachers do, the outcomes of a class. It would make sense, wouldn't it, if these apps just define what their learning outcomes are and they can be measured against those outcomes?
Well, and the thing is, they do define it. Many of them will claim it, but unfortunately they don't measure it with objective measures. They might be doing their own internal studies that they self-publish and claim these effects, but they have never been independently verified by objective research. So it's extremely important that we have both the collaboration going on as well as the independent verification research.
That's Natalia Kurchakova. And Angelica, I know this is an issue quite close to your own heart. You've been following the adoption of technology tools and EdTech in schools in Brazil for quite a few years. So what's the current scenario where you are when it comes to these EdTech apps?
It's a rather complex subject. In many states in Brazil, use of apps, EdTech apps, is mandatory. And you often hear from teachers juggling around 10, 20 different platforms for their classes. But here's the catch. They're spending more time clicking through apps than actually teaching. And it makes you wonder, when did education become more about data entry than student interaction? And you have... while states are generally pushing for digital goals and metrics, I get that. There are also a few surveys that suggest that in general, most teachers think that those platforms aren't really improving student learning. And even more telling is the fact that the majority of Brazilian schools don't really have enough connectivity or even the equipment to meet these tech requirements. And the use of the apps is mandatory nevertheless. So sometimes progress isn't about how many apps you're using.
So where does that leave us then in terms of the way that we're seeing the adoption of all these like EdTech or allegedly EdTech apps in Brazil?
I think the people in the front line need to be heard, and there needs to be collaboration, as Natalia was pointing out. Many teachers in Brazil say they're not teaching anymore. They're just filling out platform forms students find the apps quite useless. So when education gets caught between digital transformation and classroom reality, something's got to give. Again, using the Brazilian case as an example, you need to think about balancing innovation with practicality. In Brazil, schools are being told to enter competitions of who scores highest on this or that platform. But in the meantime, teachers are reporting mental health impacts, technical hurdles. And I think the problem is the mandatory nature, as well as that demand to hit targets and competitions and so on. I think that undermines pedagogical autonomy and transforms the school into a sort of producer of numbers for the government. I think sometimes the race to digitize needs to slow down and kind of ask what serves students best.
Yeah, it's just asking those really fundamental questions, isn't it? Angelica, thank you for that for today. I think that's where we're going to leave it for this edition. Remember, folks, we'd still love to have your New Year's tech resolutions. It's not too late to send those in, and we'll do a little fun piece on that if we get enough of them. So that would be lovely. Right then, the production manager is Liz Toohey. We are with the Evergreen Podcast Network. You've been hearing there from Angelica Mari. I'm Gareth, and our editor and producer is Anya Dikterovic, and you're the listener, which is why you're here. All right, see you next time. Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. It's Michael Calore, Director of Consumer Tech and Culture at Wired, here with my colleagues, senior writer Lauren Good.
Hello.
And Wired contributor Zoe Schiffer.
Hey, everyone.
We're here to tell you about our new podcast, Uncanny Valley, a show about the people, power, and influence of Silicon Valley.
Every week, we get together to talk about how technology and culture from the Valley is influencing our everyday lives.
We dig into questions like, will we ever get our privacy back? Is OpenAI for real? And how are Silicon Valley billionaires impacting U.S. elections?
The first episode of Uncanny Valley comes out on October 31st. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.